According to their structure, data sufficiency questions can be divided into two categories: yes/no questions and find the value questions. Let's first talk about the value questions. In value questions, you are asked to find a certain value, for example, a length of a side, a value of a variable, or the amount of time needed to do something. Remember, you don't actually have to calculate this value. All you need to do is to determine whether the information provided is sufficient to do so. Another important point about find the value questions is that you have to find one possible value. For example, what is the value of x? From statement 1, we know that x squared equals 16, and statement 2 says that x is a positive integer. From statement 1, we can determine that x is 4 or negative 4. However, in order for the statement to be sufficient, we must be able to find only one value, and thus this statement alone is not sufficient. Statement 2 alone does not do any good since there is an infinite number of positive integers. If we combine both statements, we know that x equals 4 or x equals negative 4 from statement 1, and that x is positive from statement 2. Therefore, the only possible value of x is 4. Together, the statements are sufficient. As you can see, even though statement 1 allows us to calculate the value of x, it is not sufficient since a statement in a value question is considered sufficient only if it allows us to find one possible value. On the other hand, be careful for trap questions. For example, what is the value of x to the power of 8? Statement 1 says that x squared equals 16. And statement 2 says that x is a positive integer. Again, from statement 1, x is either 4 or negative 4. However, in this case, statement 1 is sufficient since we don't need the value of x, but need the value of x to the power of 8, which is the same regardless of whether x is 4 or negative 4. Negative 4 to the power of 8 equals 4 to the power of 8. Because a negative number raised to an even power becomes a positive number. In this case, statement 1 is sufficient, statement 2 alone is obviously insufficient, and the correct answer is A. Now let's talk about yes/no questions. When a data sufficiency question starts with is, are, does, do, this is a yes/no question. This type of question may seem a little tricky since you have to determine whether either of the statements or both of them combined are sufficient to prove that yes or no answer. If the statement leaves open a possibility of both yes and no, depending on the numbers you use, then it is not sufficient. Examples of such questions: is x an integer? Is A greater than B? Is Jessica older than Sarah? A statement in such questions is considered sufficient if it contains enough information to provide a certain yes answer or a certain no answer. Do not confuse answer no with insufficient. For example, if the question asks whether x is an integer and statement 1 proves that x is not an integer, then statement 1 is sufficient. Answer no is not equal to insufficient. There are two possible ways to answer a yes/no question. The first one is to determine the value, and the second one is to use number properties and other information to find the answer. For example, is x greater than y? This is a yes/no question, and to answer it, we either need to know the values of x and y and then compare them, or other information which would allow us to compare x and y, for example, a ratio of x to y, or some information which would prove that x is positive and y is negative, etc.